more of the traveling that you've done as maybe not so much as an entrepreneur, but as an artist, right? Like you did a lot of traveling when you were in college and you still continue to travel to kind of different places. So I'm curious how traveling has really affected your creativity and all of your, artistic kind of endeavors.
Yeah. So I've traveled as of this year. I've traveled to 34 countries. The bulk of it was through my second stay abroad in London, where I was able to travel to like another country within the UK and Europe almost every weekend, and that was amazing. Traveling, the experience definitely opened my eyes to a lot of cultures, seeing a lot of different things, fashion and styles, and like people's like behaviors. So I soak it all in. And I wouldn't say that it really directly influences my style or my ceramics, but it definitely has affected my openness a lot. So being open to so many different like looks, different styles, it's helped me grow in that sense, and just not having any kind of like reservations
Do
for
you
trying new things.
Do you feel that when you traveled and you're being inspired by the things around you, do you get a sense of the culture through the art, right? Let's say, I don't know, maybe you're in Europe, right? And maybe you're in an area that is a little bit more colorful, right? There's a lot of colors being used, right? Or maybe, let's say you're in Asia and the colors maybe tend to be more muted or something like that. Like I'm just making up like an example. Like, do you see that as like, the art as kind of a reflection of the culture and like the manifestation of that?
Yeah, for those like specific cultures, definitely. Just like maybe like in Japan, like a lot of things are more minimalist, or and that translates to some of their arts, like very clean, fine lines. But they also have like wabi sabi, which is like more less perfect. So I definitely see like the architecture and the art translating through the culture.
Got it. And so you mentioned you traveled to like 34 different countries. And I'm curious, of the travel of the countries that you traveled to, like I'm sure it was over, a long period of time, maybe let's say over a 10 to 20-year period or something like that.
Hmm.
Like how has traveling kind of changed when you were in like your 20s versus like kind of going into your 30s? Like, because I'm sure that the life experiences are different, but also your perspective on traveling has also kind of changed and shifted over time.
Oh, definitely. Like in my 20s, I was traveling on the cheap for everything, like cheap meals, cheap accommodations, hostels, just being there, being able to go to a new country for the experience of it. But in my 30s now, it's similar. I mean, I still like to travel like frugally, but also will splurge when, there's an occasion. So having a nice like villa in Bali is a splurge for me, or having at least one place that has a nice like hotel or Airbnb. Definitely love that experience as well.
Do you feel that
So yeah.
I was
Hmm.
gonna say, do you feel that the goals of when you were traveling in your 20s versus your 30s are kind of different? So let's say, for example, I think you mentioned like in Europe, right? You travel every weekend to a different
Hmm.
country. So I imagine that that's a lot, right? Like you're trying to knock off a bucket list for the most amount of time for the biggest bang for your buck, right? And talk to me a little bit about how that sort of maybe the goals between your 20s and 30s in terms of travel goals like have kind of shifted or changed.
It's kind of been the same because like in my 20s, my goal was to travel to, like, I did have a bucket list of like traveling to 30 countries by 30 years old, which I did. And just kind of having a taste of different cities. And now it's still very similar because I get bored very easily. I don't like staying in one city more than about 3 days. That's like my
Okay.
limit before I get bored. And then I like to travel to another place pretty quickly just to have a different experience. So I like to just kind of get a taste of everything, or different cultures and countries, and go back to it and maybe spend more time in a certain area when I can kind of reflect on it a little bit more.
I think for me, as someone who hasn't traveled to as many countries, and like the places that I've traveled to are primarily just in Asia, and particularly like Tokyo, Japan, going, I think for a time I was going maybe every other year for the most part. I thought of it as like, okay, what are the tourists, like I call them the tier one places, right? The places that, you know, you'll see, you want to see these landmarks kind of like landmark kind of things. And then
Mm.
like when you revisit, or when I revisit, it's like, okay, I'm there for very specific types of experiences. Like there's a cafe that I may want to check out. There's a food place that I want to check out. Maybe there's a museum, right, that I want to check out that's not necessarily like the most recommended, you know, tourist thing kind of like to go to. And so my thinking was just how do I dig deeper, right, into a specific country and really kind of get to experience at a deeper level versus the taster kind of method.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I do. I do that too. But I still get bored pretty easily. Like, so we went to Sapa, which is the rural side, mountainside of North Vietnam, where they have a lot of Hmong villages, and we stayed there for about 4 days. I really enjoyed it. I think I could have done 2 days and travel on, but I do particularly like kind of going off the beaten path and going to things that are less touristy, more where the locals like, and asking the locals where they go. That's more my style because I don't know, the touristy areas are less exciting and less.
Sure.
Yeah, it's much more crowded, so
I
it's
feel
less
like
enjoyable.
cities are kind of very similar, right? Like every like a downtown pretty much kind of has relatively the same kind of stuff. Like yeah, it'll be a little bit different, but you'll still have a shopping mall or coffee places or things like that. So the look and feel of a lot of metros, I feel like, are very similar.
Hmm. Yeah, I still want to check it out, like for a
Right.
day, but yeah.
Do you feel that there are in your travels, right? You've traveled 34 countries. Are there any sort of underrated countries that you've traveled to? Like stuff that's not necessarily the top of people's lists, but you feel like
Hmm.
these would be really good experiences. Maybe they're a lot cheaper because they're not as in high demand. So I'm
Hmm.
just curious if there's any countries that you would sort of recommend to travelers that are thinking about the next destination but don't necessarily want kind of the standard typical tourist countries that they want to go to.
Oh yeah, man, so many. I really love Myanmar, which is used to be Burma, and being able to go there, it's just seeing this whole country that seems so preserved. They have thousands of temples that you can still, well, I'm not sure if you can still go and climb on them, but that's what I did. Being able to climb on the temples and see the sunrise and hot air balloons pass over, it was really incredible and so surreal and serene, and like it felt very like spiritual there. You felt that presence. I I think that's it's definitely underrated. I don't know if that's on people's radars to go to, but and then Iceland. It used to be really popular, like
I
for a
feel like it
period of
was,
time.
yeah, it was like really popular from like 2014 to
Yeah,
2017, like that 3 year period. I feel like everyone was going to Iceland.
yeah, and I still love Iceland. I thought it was amazing. Every like you can go and like have a road trip in Iceland and experience all the seasons in one day. It's pretty amazing, and waterfalls, and it's beautiful. Super underrated. I would love to go back to Iceland, and then Czech Republic, Prague is amazing too. They have so many cool things. Like there's something called the Kunta Hora, like which is
Okay. What is it?
like
Yeah,
a
what is
skull.
Kunta?
It's like this chapel that has like a bunch of skulls, like skull art, like real
Okay.
human skull art, and it was really cool. It was really off the beaten path to get to, also. Um, and then I don't know. There's just so many places. I went to the Philippines.
Okay.
I went to Coron, Palawan, which is an island. I think it's one of the less popular islands to go to, but that was amazing as well. You can like dive under like these shallow water like caves and get to the other side of the lagoon, and it feels super private.
Right.
So many places to go
Yeah.
to.
My girlfriend, she's Filipino, and she sends me
Mhm,
pictures. She sends me like TikToks and Instagram stories of like Palawan and Coron. I mean, she actually, the funny
mhm,
thing is she focuses on those, and she actually
mhm.
doesn't really send me stuff on about Cebu, which I feel like
Oh,
is like the
okay.
little bit more like well-known touristy kind of island
Yeah.
in the Philippines. So that's something I just kind of observed and noticed.
Yeah, no, Corona is amazing.
But yeah, have you ever, so in your travels, right? Like, is it would you say it's a mix between traveling with other people, or, is some of it solo traveling as well? Because I feel like that also kind of informs what kind of experience that you're going to have.
Oh, well, I mean, I've only really solo traveled once, and that was to Fiji on my way to New Zealand,
Okay.
which was just for one day. And that was it was it was a good experience. I felt safe. I was just kind of following what the guides told me to go do and check out, and I had a lot of fun going by myself. But I realized also that it was kind of like lonesome. And if like I wanted photo, there was no one there to take photos
Right.
for me. And I definitely enjoy having a partner at least to go travel with. And I've done like group traveling too, and it's fun in its own way. But I think I definitely prefer traveling with just like my partner or a friend, like just like two people going and hanging out and exploring.
I would say you should try solo traveling at least once for obviously longer than a day. And this is coming from personal experience where pretty much in my early 20s, I didn't have a partner to go with, right? And so I feel like the social stigma was like I know there are people who obviously do solo travel, they backpack and stuff like that, they stay at hostels. Uh, but I felt that one, like people, you either had to have a group of people that wanted to do the same things that you did, right? Or like that people that wanted to do similar activities. And then there was also like, hey, you have a significant other, you travel with your significant other. Didn't have a significant other
Hmm.
for the longest period of time. So I didn't really want it to wait, right? I didn't want to wait. I didn't want to be beholden to like, hey, I
Hmm.
need to have a significant other. I need to have a group of friends to travel. Every
Hmm.
year you only get so many vacation days, and I felt like I probably should use them. So traveling alone, you're right. It can be kind of a lonely sort of experience, at least initially. But I think that's the point of staying in like hostels early on,
Hmm.
and you find that a lot of people want to do the same things that you do. Like they're going to go to all the
Yeah.
tourist stuff and stuff like that. So you're actually really not that alone. But in the times that you are alone, it does really give a good introspective kind of feel. You could almost say it's kind of spiritual because you're kind of alone in your
Hmm.
own thoughts. And yeah, maybe getting photos are a little bit more difficult, or you have to kind of go up to people and ask like, hey, can you take my photo? But people are often used to that as well. But you'd be surprised how much you're kind of forced to make friends or to force to
Yeah.
socialize.
No, I definitely agree. I think, well, I mean, there's more times than that where I have just kind of experienced cities on my own. And I feel like I am able to be more outgoing and like initiate conversations and talk to new
Right.
people and strangers when I'm by myself than with somebody else.
For sure,
So that's fun.
100%. Yeah. That's something that where I've actually met a lot of my friends, right? Like new friends that I've traveled and met was not necessarily when traveling in groups, but traveling by myself and, basically being put in a situation or forcing myself into a situation where I have to talk, to someone to really get that social interaction. And then,
Hmm.
people that you meet in the hostels, like maybe they are from a different country, and when you go visit that country, like I've met up with them as well. They've hosted me for dinners or meetups and stuff like that, so they've become kind of like longtime friends, and that's something that you kind of expand your friend network as well.
Yeah, totally.